in the
Of
Matrix.
holidays. Okay, that's the topic. That's cool.
Have a very Merry Christmas.
I just
Ooh,
recently
you're gonna
learned
sound
about
Yeah.
the psychedelic history of Christmas, like the Serbian shamans that used to deliver magic mushrooms through people's chimneys.
Serbian or Siberian?
Oh, Siberian. I'm sorry. Yeah, Siberian. You're right. Yeah. Very different.
So that explains the flying reindeer.
Yeah.
So, yeah, okay. So, we're off to a good start. This week, the psychology
All right.
of holidays.
All right, are we ready?
We're
Yeah.
ready.
Elise, are you ready?
Yeah, I'm on it. We're
Dude, she's
rolling.
starting.
Oh, all right. And we are also live.
Nice.
The psychology of the holidays. Coming to you live with practicing safe sex, and as I say that, sizzling breakfast sounds come in, which is very strange because usually it's
Bacon
nighttime
and
sounds. Lauren and Justin, would you like to introduce yourselves to those who are not familiar with your presence at this particular time of the sun?
Sure. Laurent, you can go first.
Me first. Laurent Schultz. I live in southern Norway. I'm a professor at the University of Agder in the Department of Global Development, and also one of the founders of Culture Pulse, which uses technology, natural language processing to do all kinds of cool stuff that we talk about here.
And I am Justin Lane. I am the other founder at Culture Pulse, and do the weird, nerdy tech side of things when it comes to creating AI that does weird and sometimes creepy things, and kind of move forward from there.
Beautiful. Elise, I guess like our first follower who just kind of keeps championing us and forcing us to continue doing this.
I'm
with
I'm
questions.
holding down
this
the feminine
point.
energy
She's
here.
in.
It's very important, very important when you're deconstructing the patriarchy, which I think is an important aspect of the work that needs to be done. But yeah, thanks, Brian. I'm an entrepreneur. I'm a crypto entrepreneur. I run a direct trade B2B marketplace for independent farmers, and extremely interested in technology and community building, and of course fucking the patriarchy. So thanks for having me, y'all.
Figuratively.
Nice.
So, Justin, would you like to transition us from fucking the patriarchy into the psychology of the holidays, which I feel like can be related. There's a bridge there somewhere, but I'm not going to build it.
There's a very funky fun bridge that you can travel to get there, I'm sure. I think, yes, it's a hard transition to land. It's hard. But I guess you could say, if we're going from patriarchy to Santa Claus, it's a pretty easy one. One giant fat white male who runs over a bunch of elves and keeps his wife doing God only knows what 364 days a year. So that's a bridge that's what we'll walk across.
We've just been banned from Twitch and LinkedIn. No,
But Rumble will take us. Rumble will take anybody. The inclusion.
I've seen,
of Rumble.
comically but not comically, I've seen a lot of the like World War II history channels have been demonetized on YouTube, so then now they're streaming on Pornhub.
What?
Wait, what?
Yeah. So you can learn about World War II history on Pornhub
Wait, why would YouTube not?
because
want
it was
World
about
War II?
guns.
Okay.
It was they
That's
missed.
So
Yeah.
they have algorithms that say if there are guns, we're going to block it?
Yep.
Really?
Yeah.
That's really sad from like a societal perspective on how we're going to learn about history,
Yep.
because you don't really want your high school substitute teacher trying to Google that World War II documentary in the wrong website.
Yep.
It's gonna make AP history a lot more interesting.
Was it if you go on Pornhub and search for American DILF gives it to a bunch of Brits, there's a pirated copy of Hamilton.
I've heard that before. I think you mentioned that.
Can you explain?
I have not
to
yet
Can you explain to a baby boomer what a DILF is? I really only need the first letter.
I think it's Dad I'd like to fuck.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
Yeah.
Or you should have figured that one out.
Democratic founding father, but just one Catholic. Well, it depends on how it is. But
So
speaking
holidays.
of Santa.
So yeah,
Speaking of
why
days.
why is it so easy, or why is there this constant tradition of telling our children that there is a magical agent who brings gifts to them and is watching them to see whether they're naughty or nice?
Yeah.
Hmm.
So it's kind of a fun one, right? Because there's the psychological reason as to why it's catchy, but there's the historical reason as to why it is what it is, right? And so Elise brought up earlier, right, that historically, um, there was like this idea that the shamans would go around and basically throw mushrooms down chimneys, which kind of builds in part of that Santa myth of how the chimney gets involved at all, but also might explain the flying reindeer, because that's just one of those things you might see. Oh, there's a sleigh, there's flying reindeer. But it's interesting too, because the Saint Nicholas, part of the Santa legend also comes from Central and Eastern Europe. So there's like a really interesting kind of crossover there, where there seems to be like not exactly the American Coca-Cola Santa paradigm that a lot of people have in mind today. It really comes from like these wild Eastern European traditions of like guys who just start giving presents out through windows and dropping shrooms down your chimneys. And
The Norwegian word for Santa is julenissen, or
Julenissen.
big Christmas elf, literally.
Interesting, because I guess the pagan traditions there would have had Yule as their standard, 21st of December,
Yeah.
aspect of it. I think that's always been an interesting part of it too, like the date, the 25th of December for Christmas, because on the one hand, like a lot of it doesn't really make sense, but then the same reasons it doesn't make sense are also good explanations. Like the Eastern European traditions, you have like Mikuláš, which is like a Saint Nicholas character, comes in and dresses in the sort of like red with the fringe and everything, and comes in and gives presents and stuff like that. That's not done on the 25th. That's actually done on the 5th of December. The 25th of December, though, is 3 days after the solstice. So you have this like old tradition where in the solar calendars, right, you would know this is the shortest day of the year. And then you could get the 25th by saying, well, if, Jesus dies and then rises on the third day, and you have this like 3-day lag, right, before you're supposed to have the next risen savior. You see this in like Mithraism. You see this in a lot of the mystery cults in the Greco-Roman Empire. And then if you're adding a few extra days to there, you get to the 24th. You get to Christmas Eve, where you can have the full tradition of the gift giving and everything.
So, correct, and my understanding is minimal for reasons, but the origin of Santa Claus was initially a subject to be feared, right? Like the very earliest origins.
In some cultures, so in some
Really,
cultures,
it really differs.
Yeah, like in Germany and Austria, you do have a Krampus figure, which is much more of like this like evil demon guy. In Czech Republic and Slovakia, the Mikuláš character goes around with an angel and a chert, which is like a little devil, and the angel gives the good boys and girls candies and little presents, and the chert gives coal if you've been bad. So there's like the little devil that can jump in the window and give coal to the bad boys and girls, or people who didn't clean their shoes well enough when they put them in the window for Mikuláš. So there's the naughty and nice like paradigm that's been there, but the Krampus figure is like particularly gnarly. But that's really unique though to just sort of like the German and like the Germanic like Christmas characters. I don't know, Laurent, is there a Norse Christmas demon?
Nah. Well, I mean, a Nissen elf kind of gnome figure can cause trouble or bring gifts. So it's like can be the same character that does both or either. And not just around Christmas, other times too, but Yule Nisan is like the biggest, most powerful,
Yeah.
interesting.
Yeah, so it's interesting, right? Because there's like the historical context that gave rise to these characters and myths that like kind of through globalization have all kind of crossed and become this one thing, which through I guess Norman Rockwell and Coca-Cola have become the fat man at the Macy's Day Parade that we've all like know and love, the bringer of capitalism to all the good boys and girls. But at the same time, there's also like this psychological reason, like why is this idea so cross culturally recurrent, and so why does it have such longevity? Where like every little kid in most every Western culture and even non-Western culture now knows about this figure and what they do. It makes it a very memorable thing, and there's a lot of like psychological reasons behind that. But it makes up also the question like, is Santa Claus a god? Like, is there like, should we really kind of reconsider the idea of Christianity as a monotheistic religion? And should we not consider it actually like a polytheistic religion where you have multiple gods, right? Like you have like God with the capital G, be him life force lady in the sky, Alanis Morissette, or bearded man, plus Jesus, plus Santa.
Where does the designation of God come in? Like, how did it transition from legend to God?
To deity.
Yeah, to deity.
Yeah, so in all religions, there's one of the things that all of the sort of supernatural agents, right? The things that can do things with their supernatural powers, like your gods and your deities, they all have the ability to like violate what it means to be human in an interesting way. Like either because they don't die, or they can fly, or
they know more stuff.
Yeah, or exactly. They're like omniscient, right? They can know everything, or they can know a lot of things.
Whether you're naughty or nice.
Yeah, whether you're naughty or nice, whether or not you've sinned, whether or not you did the right ritual at the right time. There's like all of these different things that they can do that other humans just simply can't do. But the fact that they violate the expectation that we have about what it means to be human also makes them more memorable, right? Because if you see like a mountain, you're like, oh, okay, well, I see mountains all the time. But if you see a mountain that like has a cliff that looks like a face, then all of a sudden that becomes more memorable, right? Like on the American quarter for New Hampshire, right? They had the old man in the mountain. And there's a lot of mountains in New Hampshire, and a lot of them are very beautiful. Why is that one more memorable than the others? Because it violates your expectation of a mountain, because it mixed a human aspect with a natural aspect. And the violation of your expectation can make things really cognitively catchy, like talking dogs, right? I mean, you want to make $1 million in a movie, just like throw a talking dog in there and you're good to go. And that's kind of the same thing with like a Santa figure. And most gods in almost every religion is they're human, but then there's something about them that makes them not human, typically makes them superhuman. But at a certain point you have to think like, well, wait, does that then make them a god? Well, cognitively, they're very much the same. And the Santa figure, right? Like, he understands good versus evil. He can punish you. It's something that, like, you use to kind of enforce moral norms amongst the population. But it also, the Santa also has non-natural capabilities, such as being able to fly around the entirety of the globe in a single night on a magical sleigh. So like there's a lot of different things that violate our like physical expectations of what it means to be human, that gives Santa these godlike characteristics that makes him really memorable across cultures, which is why you have like you'll have the what is it, the Yule elf in Norway, Laurent? So you'll have like the Yule elf, you'll have Santa, you'll have Saint Nick, you'll have Nicholas, you'll have
and just to underline, part of that memorability has to do with the agent's capacity to punish or reward, because if the mountain in New Hampshire could also punish you or reward you, it would be even more memorable. And this too is part of our evolved inheritance. If you think about early humans, beliefs like this, beliefs that can be transferred from one generation to the other. They're more easily transferred if they're memorable, the way Justin was describing. But if they're playing a social role, in other words, if everyone in the group believes that there are hidden agents that are watching you who will punish you, even if no one else in the village sees you, if everyone really believes that, then they're more likely not to cheat or to steal, even if no one's watching, for example. And they're also more willing to go to war for the group because they believe they'll be rewarded by these invisible or ambiguous agents.
Yeah, there's even some experimental evidence that's it's a little controversial because it doesn't always replicate perfectly, but there's some experimental evidence that if you put out like a donation basket and you put like some muffins around it, right, some sort of baked goods, that if you put eyes next to that donation basket, that people are less likely to take it without donating money, and that people in fact actually will donate more money on average because they feel like they're being watched.
Like googly eyes?
So no, just like two circles that look like eyes. But
okay, so wait, time out for a second.
Fun, right?
Time out. We have a donation widget on our website.
Yeah,
see where I'm going
eyes
with
there.
this.
Yes, if you put eyes on it, in theory, you should see an
I'm
average
100% testing this.
Dude,
Little
let's do
eye
this.
emoji next to
How
our
many-
donation button.
So not how much money have you had donated, but how many individual donations have come through that widget so far?
I'll
More
go
than
look.
20 or 30?
Yeah.
Then this would be interesting, right? Because you might have a sample that's good enough that we could do like a pre-post test on this, right? So if we reconfigure the donation widget so that in some way it has like some eye
What if it's just
quality
like
to
what
it.
if it's just like a photo of the top of my head where I'm like peeking over it?
I feel like that's gonna scare them away from
Fair enough. we have a lot of creators in the community that are on Patreon, so like, and some of them are inclined to fuck around with people. So I'll just be like, hey, did you know that there's some
There'd be a lot more
experimental
eyes,
evidence
yeah.
that says that if you put eyes next to your donation widget?
Yeah, like this is one of those interesting things that in principle, right, when you do it in the real world, they say it works. So the question is, does it also work from the donation side?
Yeah.
Like online? I think that's an open question. I mean, it's one of those things that probably couldn't hurt to test. Like,
Or it works the other way too. So like at an office, if you have, if the rule is you're supposed to put your dishes in the dishwasher, not leave them in the sink. If the sign has eyes on it, then people are much more likely to put it in the dishwasher.
yep.
Can I just want to start selling googly eyes on Amazon as like donation increasing widgets.
Like in principle, like there is some experimental evidence that this works. There's other evidence that has not actually replicated the effect. But it's interesting to note though that like depending on how you create the faces, you can manipulate this feeling of being watched, and therefore you need good behavior. So one of the things that's interesting to remember, right? So in Burlington, Vermont, right off of Main Street, there was an alleyway that always had like gnarly graffiti for years, and people would just graffiti all sorts of like whatever names, and they would do tags on it and stuff. And then years ago, like we're talking obviously over 10 years ago, because this was still when like we were in Burlington, someone spray painted a picture of something that looked like the Virgin Mary, right? It was like a commissioned thing that was there, and nobody would paint over it. It stopped the illegal graffiti because nobody wanted to violate it. Now, Vermont is like one of the most secular states in the United States, but nevertheless, you see this thing where people don't want to do it. There's another one actually. The last time I was in Burlington, it was still there. If you go down, not Pine Street. If you go down Pine Street out of Burlington, out from the city center south towards Shelburne, right before you get to the gas station near the lake, near the Burlington Electric thing, there's a place where a guy has spray painted these giant, very beautiful Buddha eyes on the side of one of the old transformer buildings, and no one has spray painted over those eyes. And it's right at one of the major bus stops on Shelburne Road, next to a gas station. Like people are hanging out there, like buying Arnie Palmers in the middle of the night, like up, just kind of hanging out, shooting it, doing up to no good. But like, you don't see any graffiti over those Buddha eyes.
I mean, so the donation widget that we use, the creators of it are friends, and they have a very large audience of people who use this. So like we have access to a very large amount of data. But I mean, anecdotally, this seems entertaining. But for 501c3s, this is a big deal. If you can increase donations by any small percentage just by adding some element of human eyes, that's overwhelmingly substantial.
Yeah, and it's so the idea of it, right, is it's the idea that something is watching you.
Yeah.
So, I mean, a lot of times, you also see this right around the holidays where you're going into the checkout aisle at the grocery store, and like the person will ask you, "Oh, do you also want to donate $2 to this children's fund?"
Yeah.
And like you immediately have this like social pressure of like, "Ooh, well, I probably should," like, and it's always for a cause, right? It's like, "Do you want to donate to needy children?" And they phrase it in a way where like you're like, your only way out of this is to be like,
do you want to rip food out of the mouths of the hungry children?
right, exactly, right. So you're kind of forced into this thing because there's this social pressure. The eyes are the closest thing that you can get to doing that graphically without having any sort of like text or communication needed, like verbally. Or at least that's what it appears.
I want to ask a question related to this whole thing of parents lying to their children about Santa Claus. If parents are willing to lie to their kids, and there's a lot of discourse going on, about the ethics of that, like whether it's right or wrong to lie to your children about something like that. Like what's gonna be the interest of parents wanting AI, such as a Santa Claus like AI that's watching them and their behaviors on Roblox or on Snapchat, to encourage them to behave well. Because it's totally possible, right? To like technologically keep an eye on your children. And
I'm all I can think of right now is like a kid playing Roblox with like a Santa has entered the chat.
I mean, there could be like, could you imagine like a Santa app, right? Like there are these parental tracking apps that you can install on your children's devices, so that you can see what websites they're going to. You can block certain websites, you can block certain apps as well, so that your kids stay within the boundaries that you want them to as a parent. So it'd be interesting. What if one of those had like a Santa theme, so that it was kind of like reinforcing this and kind of leveraging the cultural myth in order to enact further oversight.
It sends a ping to the child. He knows when you're sleeping. He knows when you're awake.
I mean, so
He's
does
watching
Google
you right now.
Yeah.
Samsung hit me up the other day. Were you asleep from this part to this part? Because I was wearing my smartwatch. So like Santa, if Santa's using Android, he does know when you're sleeping and when you're awake. That's easy. So
what are
Steve Jobs knew.
What are the long-term psychological outcomes of, at least kind of highlighted lying to children? But if you I guess extend the scope of the lie, right? So if one lie is like Santa Claus is real and he visits you, and then you extend the scope of the lie to say like, if you don't turn off your TV by 10 o'clock, using some notification app or something, then Santa's going to know, right? So you take it out of the construct of Christmas, and you basically are parenting with this myth. Later down the road, does that change an adult's behavior of like, well, now that Santa's not watching me, like, I'm going to do the opposite? Does it influence it in the opposite way later in life?
So the idea that like once you no longer have that safeguard there, or that influence or coercion there, that you kind of like the rubber band snaps back and you try and go the other direction.
Yeah.
I'm not aware of anything suggesting that would be the case in this instance, where like once you stop believing in the myth, that like you go in the opposite direction. I think part of it is because the usual progress, right, as to, let's say, when the myth wanes out of childhood, right, when you're 8 or 9 years old, right, and somebody tells you this, that, and the other at school, typically, right, you still have the next 10 years underneath of your parents' guidance and tutelage in their house. and generally, right, parents only really bring that out 4 weeks a year, right? Like no one's in April, like the third week of April being like, you're getting cold. Like it's just not, it just doesn't pop up, right? It comes up in like the weeks immediately preceding because it's there. Otherwise, you just have to use old school authority to do it. So when the myth is broken, the myth is always temporary and cyclical.
Yeah, or appeals to others. I mean, more traditional supernatural agents. God is watching, or Allah is watching, or whatever supernatural agent your religion worships. But I think one of the concerns, I think at least this question brings up the kind of intuition that many people, I think most people have, that if children and adults don't believe someone is watching, they will be bad. They will do terrible things. But I don't think the evidence supports that. I mean, I know that the one study, Justin, maybe you'll know the one I'm talking about, showed that children, that non-religious children were more likely to share more widely with individuals outside their group than religious children.
This Kathleen Karevu study from Boston University.
That's right. I knew you'd remember. Yeah, and there's other studies too that suggest or indicate similar things. Or
my understanding is that didn't replicate though. That actually there ended up not really being a lot of differences between religious and non-religious children.
Yeah, I remember hearing that too. Mm-hmm. But if we think about at the broader level, at the societal or population level, you have really successful societies that aren't led or guided by beliefs that a supernatural agent is watching you, but you might still have a government watching you.
Yeah, and so this is an interesting thing. One of my favorite authors ever, right? So we can like hone down into it, is Jared Diamond. Of the Jared Diamond books, one of my favorite is a book that he wrote called, I think it was called The World Until Yesterday or something like this. And it was all about how modern societies can learn from traditional societies. And one of the major distinctions that he writes about in part of the book that really kind of made me put the book down for a moment and like have to think about this and reflect was, he mentioned that in a lot of tribal societies, and his example for the book was from Papua New Guinea, that when, like, if somebody kills somebody else, right, the mediation, the sort of the prosecution in the defense, right, is the defense is the person who's accused of doing the killing, and the other party, right, the other side of that is the family of the guy who was killed. And what needs to happen is that, elders or people who are the mediators of the conversation, their goal is to patch up and reaffirm the social link that is broken between that individual and the individuals who are harmed. And he mentions this not only in the case of murder, but in a lot of other cases. But in the modern society, right, in a modern nation state, if you commit a transgression, the person who is on the other side of it is not the person you harmed, right? If you rob somebody's house, that guy is not the other person on the bench. They're a witness. It's the state of California versus Joe Smith burglar, right? And so when that happens, Joe Smith burglar's punishment is that he committed a crime and therefore he goes to jail because of a crime against the state. But he actually didn't do anything to the state. He did something to his neighbor, and his neighbor is still out, the TV or whatever the guy stole or whatever. So there's naturally no way of righting the wrong in a modern society, which is the very key idea of an aspect of justice in tribal societies that we kind of need to take into account and be a bit more direct about. And I thought that was a really interesting insight that I hadn't thought about, because in modern societies, the state is God in a secular society, right? They're the ones who have the omniscient and omnipotent power to take life in the case of a lot of countries, right? Or at least to end your civic life by imprisoning you until the end of your days. And they don't have to have been there in order to punish you. They can ask other people and try and bring other indirect evidence. They can bring indirect evidence against you in a way that allows them to basically act in an omnipotent and omniscient way, despite them never being the one that was harmed, a lot like a deity.
Governments are God. Got it.
A really corrupt deity. I mean, the Maxwell case right now, the fact that like solid evidence that's already been addressed now has been agreed upon. Oh yeah, the black book of the 2,000 names associated with Epstein. Like, is that the God we want to trust in?
Right? And I mean, and this implicates, I think, the relationship between like the media and social
Hey, Mrs.
media and
Hollywood,
the state
welcome
as
in.
well, right? Because did you guys see that the Maxwell trial tracker got banned from Twitter? It was not doing anything except retweeting information, factual information from the trial, and yet it got blocked from Twitter. So it's just like, I mean, at what point do you just say that
What
Twitter
reason did they give,
is a
Justin? What did they
government?
reason-
I don't
reason
know
did
that
they give
they've
for
come out and given an official explanation.
Hmm.
But like, I can't imagine there being any other explanation or any other
It's good
way
to
of
have you
looking at
back.
this except to say
Hey,
that
Craig,
Twitter
welcome in.
is a state-based propaganda channel that is just very clearly only allowing for certain kinds of speech about certain kinds of things, and their community standards are really just a facade that they're using to try and limit things, because
Hey,
that
Craig,
is just one instance
congratulations on
of
the
like,
progress of your
a
challenge.
lot of
I
people
think-
track over this all the time, but like that's just kind of like, are you kidding me? They
I
blocked
I
that.
object to the label community standards because like who's the community that
I'm
decided
doing
that?
a live,
Who showed up
a
to
live
create that list?
podcast
Like
before you
where's
know.
that community? And
Good point.
there is no community. It's just a
There isn't.
label to guys' legal terms and their desires of how they want to run the platform, same as every other platform.
Yeah,
Maybe if you put eyes in the logo.
I'll check it out.
that could be. I mean, I don't know. Yeah, that would be an interesting one. So it's interesting. So when I search this on DuckDuckGo, you don't see any like, the only major media source that you see popping up immediately reporting that that was banned was from Fox News. If I go to news.google,
Oh, it looks great. It looks great, Craig.
this is one of those things, right, where like, now it's like, okay, well, who else is reporting this? So like, okay, so
I'm just
Nope,
because of the
never mind.
conversation that's happened to date. I'm hearing this conversation as like Justin going
Yeah.
around elementary school asking his friends, "Did you hear about this guy that like gives us presents? He might not be real."
my tinfoil hat at 10 years old. So this is interesting, right? When I Google Maxwell trial tracker banned on Google, I didn't see CNN. I was like, oh, there is CNN. But then I looked at this and they're not talking about it. And like, so New York Times is like, MSNBC banned from Kyle Rittenhouse courtroom. It's like, that's not have anything to do with this. So it's very weird that like, a lot of the mainstream places are not reporting about this. But you see like, yeah, the
Is
updates have
anyone
all
in
been
Twitter-
suspended and everything.
Is anyone in Twitter leadership or investors in Twitter on the list?
I don't know the answer to that. There was the list of like 200 that came out earlier that they submitted, and I think the judge did not allow it to be submitted as evidence or something like that. It was something like the Maxwell lawyers were like pushing forward this list of like all the people that they said were affiliated entities, and there was a lot of people in the media and a lot of companies that were listed. And my understanding is that it just didn't fly. They're not allowing it to be submitted as official evidence because it would implicate so many people. So the
Okay.
account was officially suspended for platform manipulation and spam. Yep,
Wow.
it violated the Twitter rules.
I'm honestly hearing the most reporting on TikTok, and that's a weird thing, but it's a thing.
Reporting.
Like, yeah, there's like reporters that are going to TikTok and just making their own rogue
Interesting.
channels because all the Twitter feeds are getting banned. Like, there's been multiple Twitter
Yeah.
feeds.
That is
There's-
the last platform on my list of platforms that I thought would be suggested for something that allows for free speech.
Well, it's not. Let's be honest, though. TikTok has a very clear agenda. Like,
Yeah.
like if you have a platform that's run by the Chinese, but the Chinese don't allow it in China, like, like what more needs to be said, right? Like, when it comes to, people just messing around and talking nonsense like it's fun to do on the internet, then TikTok is fine, right? Because it's whatever, it's inconsequential. But when it comes to the idea of like, why would certain things be allowed on TikTok and not on others?
thank you, Bernie
Like,
Castle.
you're not going to see
Welcome in.
protests for freedom and
There's a live
democracy in Hong Kong or
conversation happening. If
Taiwan
you have questions about what we're
going
talking
viral on
about,
TikTok,
yeah.
right?
There, the one TikTok video that I found that like made me get a TikTok account was this girl who is I guess a researcher, hacker, or whatever, and she trained an AI. She trained a generative AI based on 70s porn, and then made a video and took a still from the video, and it looks like a texture. Like there's no recognizable face or body part or anything.
Just a mustache.
It looks like trees with like a block of like brown. Like it's a texture. And she uploaded it, and it was immediately flagged and taken down. And she was like, I don't know why I thought this would work for me, where I could like teach an AI like what porn was and then upload this thing that doesn't look to any human like porn, but then the AI immediately flags it for being porn. And then she's like, I think this highlights in a comical way, like the issue with AI is that like it thinks that this is porn.
Did it flag it because of the image, or did it flag it because of the caption to the image?
No, it flagged it because of the image.
That is cool.
Yeah,
That's cool.
It's also terrifying, but it's also cool. Yeah, I would like. No, I was not aware.
Shout
of
out
it.
to our sponsor, scaredandhorny.com.
Again, I don't want to Google this. Is that a real thing?
That's a real thing.
Also, not an official sponsor.
Says you.
Dude, they're not paying live bills, but maybe I need to write them an email or a TikTok. I'm gonna write him a TikTok, says the old man. But yeah, I find TikTok to be a fascinating platform. I've also found it interesting that YouTube recently has started doing like YouTube Shorts, and they're basically they're just promoting TikTok videos on YouTube. And it's like, is Google or Google and YouTube just having zero interest or care for the ethics of like the foundation behind TikTok, and then them trying to reflect that at scale to a wider audience themselves? Like, who's it that's making those decisions where they're just not really thinking about what those societal implications are? And my assumption is that there is nobody at Google who's doing that, at least not taking their job seriously and doing it.
I like Reddit's approach, where just collectively, as a community, everybody takes stuff from TikTok and posts it on Reddit, where you can watch it without being tracked by the Chinese.
Yes, like I like that. The only issue that I have with that is just that there's a lot of stuff that can't go on TikTok, but it could still go on Reddit. So the win still goes to Reddit on this one, I think. I mean, of all the big, I don't know. I've thought a lot about this over the last year or so. Of all of the major social media platforms, Reddit is the only one I think that is like stable, because all of the other ones are kind of eating themselves. Like Facebook is eating themselves. New subscriber rates have been declining for years. The user base amongst the younger generations have just completely been hemorrhaging. They're all trying to go to places like Instagram, but Instagram is, as a matter of scientific fact, toxic for a lot of their main user base, particularly younger women. Like, we just know that it's not good for their mental health, so it's kind of eating itself from the inside there. Twitter has just become such a weird amalgamation of like micro echo chambers that nobody wants to deal with, that it's just not even fun anymore. Like, the whole world just kind of sits around and tries to sift through all of the political infighting, trying to find whether Elon Musk said something about Dogecoin just so that they can smile for once in their horrible, sad Twitter lives. Like, it's just become this really weird thing where a lot of these social media companies are just like eating themselves because of their own, like, the monsters that they've created. And then there's Reddit, who's just like, we mostly like to get together and post funny stuff. And
Yeah,
people,
Reddit-
like, I see why people like it. It's a break from the nonsense.
Reddit as a company has been doing some really interesting stuff, in the sense that, like, so they took in money from Adobe, and one of the things, so Adobe paid into Reddit's internal creative team, and then Reddit's internal creative team Karma Lab then started a TV show, and they turned Photoshop battles, the community where people submit a ridiculous photo and then everybody like competes to make a more ridiculous photo from it. They turned it into a web series, and so they took a company's money and then created a community space for creation. Right? It's not a TV show; it's participatory, and it's not really native content because they're not like inserting something. They're making space for creativity, right?
Yeah.
So this already happens on a regular basis.
And was that an investment from Adobe, or was that just advertising money from Adobe?
I think it was classified as a brand activation. So like fundamentally, it's the same line item as marketing.
Yes, but
that's what I imagine. I wasn't inside
so
the
it
deal.
wasn't like they invested in Reddit. Because
Right.
didn't Tencent invest in Reddit?
Yeah.
So like, what are the contingencies on that investment?
Well, the announcement was that we just raised $400 million that we don't need. So, and there was a lot of don't look at the deal. So,
Was the
we don't know.
opposite side of that Tencent going, we just got data on like hundreds of millions of users that we do need because it's
Only
on
way to find out
servers
is
on
to
it.
invest in Tencent and get their investor updates.
Yeah, which like, who gets? I don't know that's.
I don't think
That's
we'd be
something that I
welcome.
would exactly be able to do. Yeah, I don't think that. I think they would Google that. They'd Google me and be like, I don't know about this guy. I don't think.
I think they would immediately know
I
about
don't
this
think
guy.
he'll-
They wouldn't even need to Google you. They just have to look you up in their system.
Yeah, right. I don't think this guy aligns with our crazy values. No, probably don't.
Well, you have
Yeah,
officially said on both YouTube and Twitch that you won't work with any companies with ties to China. So I think
Yeah,
they
that's
probably
true.
are well aware.
That's true. I've been put on their shit list. Well, it's mutual. Yeah, I just think that that's one of those things that I found very odd. Like, why raise why raise money when you don't have to? That just seems like a weird thing to like.
Right.
With like, we're a bunch of shareholders. Like, yeah, let's get diluted. Like,
It was. I think it was a very childish announcement, in my opinion. I think it's a different tangent of conversation. I do think that Steve, who made that announcement, has grown up a lot since then. But still, we don't know the terms of that deal, and there's a lot of lingering ire in the Reddit community about that investment.
yeah,
But that's
I
the
mean,
thing
it's what
is
there
that
should
like.
be.
Right. So then the question is like, okay, if this, Maxwell list of people with ties to Epstein did include a bunch of, like, let's say that some of them are bullshit and some of them are real, which ones are which, we don't know. If one of the people on that list was a major investor in Twitter or was a senior exec at Twitter, then that raises a lot of questions about something that could otherwise be totally justified of this ban.
Yeah.
And so, when you follow the money,
Hey, Mr. Mars.
it just raises a lot of questions, and that's a totally
If I'm
different
not
track that
mistaken,
we.
CNN was listed
Yeah.
like directly.
So now that we've successfully transitioned far, far away from the holidays, and
Back to
and out
Santa
of
Claus.
back to capitalism, we never left that. But so we're coming up on our time. We started a little bit late, but I think we have a theme for next week. Are we taking next week off and then a theme for the following? I think.
I still think we should do The Matrix next week.
Okay. I'm.
Should we take a week off though? Do you think give people time to watch it?
I mean,
that would probably
logically, yes,
be.
but
Yeah.
but like the fan in me is like, if you're not also watching it the first night it comes out, then like the
What's wrong
spoiler
with you?
alerts are on you.
Speaking of Reddit, I've seen a lot of people doing RPANs where they just play a movie and just sit there and hang out and watch a movie together, and I'm like, how are you not getting like DCMA takedowns like
Yeah.
nobody's been? And I think it's just because it's so small and like nobody knows, and so that would be very much not legal, but other people do it.
Let's just put that out.
No, there's no eyes. There's no eyes looking at us.
Yeah. See,
I
there
mean,
should
there's the
be-
little
see,
the
if
Reddit
there
snoo
were
looking
eyes-
at us, but
If there were eyes.
I mean,
Then-
other than
then
Santa
people wouldn't do
Claus,
it.
I mean, this is Santa Claus time.
He's always watching.
He's always watching. You want coal, Brian?
Yeah. What's interesting too, by the way, right? Because when you think about this, like, again, not to like come back at the last moment after 15-minute tangents, like, Santa Claus was such a successful thing that like, even in the Jewish community, they're like, dude, we need Hanukkah Harry.
My mom, one year, she tried to sell me on Hanukkah Harry. I wouldn't have it. It was
You were
that-
like, he's gonna come back 7 more times. Really?
I was just like, where did this Harry character come from? Like, I've never heard of him before. He hasn't been here. He's never given me a present. Like, where is he coming from? What's
Does
his
he have a
backstory?
Mrs.?
I don't know. I don't know about his
Harry?
relational status.
Wait, so is
How
Harry his
old were you?
last
How
name?
old were you, Brian?
This is like
Old
20.
enough to not tolerate that shit. I think
it's
I was
Mrs.
in,
Claus,
I was like
Hanukkah Hadassah or something.
13, 14 maybe. Like, old enough that my mom was, I don't know what she was thinking. I should ask
My
her
favorite,
about
and
that.
again, to continue with the capitalism and cognition of Christmas, they have the elf on a shelf,
Yeah.
Hey,
Oh my
Amanda.
god. So we found
which
an
is
image
the
of an
eyes
elf.
for your kids, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
But then they also have mensch on a bench. Hashtag Shark Tank. I love Shark Tank, but also the mensch on a bench was a really good pitch. I'm not surprised at all that they invested in that guy. But yeah, like Elf on a Shelf, right? They have the they have this whole thing where like the whole idea of like, oh, if you're not good, like this is gonna happen. But the Elf on a Shelf gamified the eyes that watch
Yeah.
you during the holidays, and then the mensch on a bench did it for the Jewish community
Yeah.
with
I
a very
saw
clever.
I saw
line.
a TikTok of a mom saying, "Yeah, my kids have been absolute shits lately." So she was the night preparing the elf. She like made a bunch of like fake looking poop and like had the elf above the kid's bed, like wiping its butt, and there was like this fake poop all over the kid's face. I loved it.
Oh, that's next level. That's next level. That's like, was it Jimmy Kimmel's like during the Christmas, just like tell your kids that you ate
Yeah.
all of their candy, and you see her just being like, just going nuts.
Yeah.
But I want to share this, which is I think my favorite Elf on a Shelf.
Oh
Oh,
yeah.
is that the Stay Puft Marshmallow Man?
That is the
God.
Stay Puft Marshmallow Man
Oh,
being
getting
grated across a
grated.
cheese grater
Oh,
into smaller
no.
marshmallows.
Hi Moana, welcome in. Good
Very
to see
nice.
you.
And on that
I'm
note,
horrified and in love with that.
this concludes our Practicing Safe Sex, and not 2 at the same time, 11 a.m. PST. So thank you so much for joining in, whether you are live or in the fourth dimension. And Justin, Laurent, Elise, thanks for popping in and making this ever a colorful conversation.
See you next
All right.
time.
Bye. We out.
Bye, y'all. Hi, Brooke.
Wonderful.
Hi, Brooke. We get a new
Hello,
phone call.
how's it going?
Good. All right. Brooke and I are going to go for a walk. Justin, I'll see you tomorrow. Laurent
Yeah.
is already gone. Elise, thank you for popping in, and I owe you an invite for the next week. I'm still in transition with the
I got
event,
it.
Majiggy.
I've got a good memory, you know, and I definitely have prioritized this in my schedule.
Honestly,
so.
we probably would have stopped doing this at some point if you weren't so enthusiastic. So
Yeah,
like, the
that's
fact
why.
that it's
It's
now
important.
a weekly thing is very much on you. So very much
Yeah.
appreciated.
I don't know if you saw, but I did like a LinkedIn thing to like let
Okay.
people know, and I
Yeah.
just invited Elise as like one of the 4 speakers.
Yeah,
that just does the events with us. I
Thank
was
you,
like, she's here every
Justin.
week. Like it's not the same without her. She's like she's in the cult now.
Yeah, I'm in the cold.
She's one of our cult leaders.
All right. Brooke,
We'll have
come
to
on
do one,
south
though.
and let's go for a walk.
All right, y'all have a great week. See you next week.
Bye.
You too.
Bye.
See you guys.
Oh, that was fun. As always, always fun, always fun. Which way are we going? Going by the trees. Welcome in, Juana. Good to see you, Mr. Mars. Let me stop this stream. We just had a conversation on the psychology of Christmas, the psychology of the holidays. Mostly, yeah, I'm gonna stop this.